mention the donation tonight.
All right, welcome everyone. This is Kristen Vincent, Chair of the Westborough School Committee. Today is Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. This meeting of the Westborough School Committee is called to order. Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States Republic, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Sorry we got on a few minutes late. Due to the impacts of the COVID-19 virus, some aspects of the open meeting law have been suspended. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, limited attendance of members of the public will be permitted at an in-person school committee meeting. School committee meetings are available for remote viewing or listening on Westborough TV's government channels, Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and online on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. Anyone attending an in-person meeting will need to wear a mask covering their nose and mouth and maintain 6 feet of distance from others at all times within the meeting room. If you are uncomfortable attending the school committee meeting in person, but you wish to have your thoughts shared during citizens' request, please send an email to school-committee@westboroughk12.org anytime before 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting and indicate that you would like your message read aloud for the public record. Any votes we take this evening will be roll call votes due to the wearing of masks. And I'd like to notify everyone in the room with us tonight that this meeting is being recorded by Westborough TV. And thank you to Westborough TV for covering the broadcast tonight. We have with us tonight Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration Irene Oliver, Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee Steve Durrett, School Committee members Sarah Dulé, Lisa Edinburgh, and Raghu Nandan, Student Representative Kyla Kamugu, Recording Secretary Jen Benton, and we have staff from Westborough TV handling the broadcast and recording of this meeting. I will go over our agenda for tonight. We will have an approval of minutes from April 7th, 2021 regular session. Then we'll have the superintendent's report and reports from the Assistant Superintendent and Director of Finance and Administration. Then we'll have individual school committee member reports, building project updates, citizens' requests, COVID-19 impact update, which includes the data dashboard review and an update on summer recovery programming. Then we'll have a discussion around the calendar recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day or Columbus Day. We'll have an ELL program review summary, a grants update, and a review of COVID funds. And we'll finish with an Assabet Valley Collaborative third quarterly update. And we do not need an executive session this evening. So we will begin with an approval of minutes from April 7th, 2021 regular session. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. We'll start with Sarah.
Dulé, yes.
Raghu? Lisa?
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve?
Durrett, yes.
And Vincent, yes, 5-0. Those are approved. So I'll turn it over to our superintendent. Welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. It's good to see all of you. It was a quiet week off last week, which was enjoyable for both families and faculty. It really was. I mean, I worked during a lot of the week, as did a lot of admin, but people also were able to take a few days off. And the offices here were very quiet. I think families were really, stepping back and taking a break and then getting ready for a full return, which we then have started. We also, as part of a quiet week off, had some space to start to think about next year planning, which always is the time of year when we're starting to think about class sectioning, schedules, and just some time to begin to carve out some thinking time for that was really advantageous. And Beyond that, it was pretty much just an opportunity for everyone to enjoy some relaxation. I would add as well, tonight we're having a jazz concert right now, and that's really an exciting celebration that we have a return to in-person concerts where people can enjoy the musical talents of our students. And I get to judge Mr. WHS, which will be coming up, which is a big highlight as well, that it will be in person this year. So those things feel like real joyful celebrations of our return. And I will provide all of my other major updates when we do our COVID discussion.
Thank you. Daniel, do you have anything to share now?
Yeah, I just want to give you another update on the Mcas exam, which we talked about at our last meeting. There are a couple things. One, I did misspeak when we were talking about, I guess, Lisa, I think you asked the question about the whether they were going to exempt the class of 22. And I had forgotten they didn't take the exam because of COVID at all in 10th grade. So I was talking as if we would only have a small percentage of students that it would affect, but it actually affects the entire class because they had missed taking their 10th grade exam, and the state has waived that requirement, so that class will not have to do a makeup exam. So that's an important thing just for correction's sake. And then there, I believe I alluded to the fact that the state had recently come out with new guidance without details yet about remote students and providing them with a way to take the exam from their house remotely, and we still don't have the details on that. Tomorrow will be, there's a conference, and all our administrators, a representative from each of the schools will be going, virtual. I shouldn't say it's a conference, it's more just like a informed session, the logistics of doing that. And what we don't know is whether we're required to say to our remote families, we're going to give you the exam at home, or whether we'll have the option to invite the remote families to come in to take the exam in school. So while we're putting out notices now to parents about the students who are in the in-person program, that when the dates are for the exam, clarity about the remote students and what they will be doing in terms of their exam is going to be hopefully had by the end of this week, and some communication will start flowing from the district next week on that. That's all on the Mcas.
Thank you. Irene, do you have anything to share now? I know you have a big piece later.
Yeah, I just a couple things. So now this time of year is typically when nicer weather, we are able to get outside and clean up the grounds, and DPW comes through and sweeps all the parking lots and the upkeep, and so there's a lot of flurry of that happening right now. Also, there's a lot of differences this year with the change of food service, the way they produce the meals being all in school versus remote and hybrid and so forth. So there's a little bit of changes there. So it's a little bit different for that department. Transportation is different there as well, trying to get students managed on the buses and appropriately, back and forth to school, as well as preparing for the summer school. So it just goes on and on and on through the different departments. Not to withstand that this time of year, the finances are on a huge upswing because we're anticipating year end, and so we want to project out to make sure that our year end is appropriately closed with the appropriate amount of money at year end, and that our expenses are wisely expended, and that we can plan appropriately. So there's a lot of activity in that regard. And another thing, I know that I wasn't here at the last meeting, and there was a donation that was mentioned from the Ocean State job lot, but I don't know that the dollar amount was mentioned, so I wanted to recognize that it was $1,500, and there were 2 pallets of face shields, small containers of hand sanitizers, and packages of disinfecting wipes, and those were put into place right away. So it was greatly appreciated, and there was a thank you note to them. And yeah, so that's my report for tonight.
Thank you for that update. Yeah, at our last meeting, Daniel had some photos of the pallets, like the boxes of the pallets that came from Ocean State. So that was great, but it's good to know the dollar amount there too, so thank you. And it is a busy time of year, and just layer on top of that, the extra finances we're keeping track of due to COVID funds and bringing all students back. So it's, in some ways, it feels like September because schools are starting, like new routines need to be built at schools, and that's why there's more traffic in town. But until it kind of eases out a little bit, it has that feel to it.
Yeah, we did have a meeting earlier this week. Lisa, you were involved with that, and so it's almost as if it's the first 2 weeks of the start of school, and we say it takes like a couple weeks for everybody to get into the rhythm and the routine of traffic patterns and so forth. And you mentioned the COVID grants and so forth, and I will mention that later, but it does create a little bit of complexity to tracking and expenditures.
Sure. Thank you. We'll move into our school committee member reports. I'm going to start with Kyla, if you have anything to share tonight, and just make sure you use the microphone because it's hard to hear. There you go.
I really don't have anything. I just wanted to acknowledge that the high school is now fully in person, and a lot of people are kind of concerned about the number of people in the hallways, but that's to be expected since people haven't been in person for like a year. But I just wanted to voice the students' concerns about like how many people are in the school, and yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thanks. Sarah.
Yes, I said a couple of things. Prior to the break, the high school sent out another newsletter, and it was, again, chock full of information, department reports and happenings, information on quarantining, and info from the school counselors, thing about guidance specifically, mental health, all the clubs that we're running. So if you didn't get a chance to read it, go back and take a look because it was very comprehensive. So thank you for that. I just want to mention that next Wednesday, May 5th, is the spring walk, bike, and roll to school day. The elementary schools usually participate in that, so anyone is welcome. I know we can't do big group activities. Maybe that can come back for the October walk to school day, but for now, everyone's invited to walk, bike, or roll to school on Wednesday, May 5th. And then the last thing is that the Westborough Education Foundation, the last couple days to purchase your pinwheels, flowers in honor of teachers, any staff members, administrators, secretaries, nurses, anyone who you want to recognize. Then the gratitude gardens will be planted this weekend, so look for those popping up at all the schools next week. So last few days to purchase.
Can't wait to see that. And I do know for the walk, bike, and roll to school day, I think it was last year that some parents were bringing their kids closer to a school, so like going to a church parking lot or a business parking lot kind of near a school or the road that leads to the school, and then letting the kids like bike or walk like from that closer point. So that's something that, you know, parents can consider doing too.
Yes, great idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Raghu, do you have anything?
Yeah, thanks. And as you know, last night the Board of Selectmen approved the climate action plan for Westborough. It was unanimously approved, and it was approved by our committee as well previously. And now comes the hard part, to actually execute on that plans. So we have to do from our end for the schools. And going through the climate action plan, I've done it several times, and one of the things that came to my mind is there's some things that we have to do from a building. The target is 50% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So that's quite an aggressive target, but we can do it as a committee, as a community if we come together. There's some things that we will have to do, like building efficiencies and energy efficiencies in buildings and things like that. But also, we need to get the students involved to bring it up. I mean, they're passionate. most of the students are passionate because it's their future, frankly. Like waste reduction, tree planting, we can get them empowered to do those kind of things that will, it should, I think, looking through the climate action plan, it could be a top-down and a bottom-up, both kind of approach at the same time. So I would strongly suggest the administration to take steps to empower the students, especially the high school students, to do some steps like, like I said, waste reduction and tree planting can be easily done by them.
No, I totally agree. I'll just note that I think both admin and student groups really across all age levels, really even kindergarten forward, are in favor of us having more engaged planning, and it certainly will be a very developed part of our strategic plan, and it will lay out a range of opportunities for us to increase our own waste reduction, composting, looking to our future with buildings and different things like that. So we're definitely, and engaging the various student groups to plug them into some of the more established committees, and also to have our own internal kind of student-based committee to bring issues forward. So I think there's a lot of student advocacy that have moved other things forward, and it'll be a big part of kind of what we layer in over the next probably 2 years.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Yes, so the gratitude garden that Sarah had announced has been ongoing, but I wanted to let people know that the Westborough Education Foundation, that's a fundraiser to celebrate and honor remarkable teachers and staff, and it's a wonderful way to support Westborough Education Foundation, which gives out grants to teachers for programs that are not funded by the school system. And I'm mentioning it because this morning, the Westborough Education Foundation Grants Committee met and approved 10 grants that allows teachers to do some really creative programming with their curriculum. It's pretty amazing. So thank you for all those people who are purchasing, a donation in honor of our teachers and staff. Another thing going on is on Saturday, for people who didn't know, the Central District Massachusetts Music Educators Association actually had auditions for Central District, and they were remote recorded by students on their own and sent in. And this Saturday, there will be music clinics that allow orchestra, chorus, jazz, and the concert bands to go and attend these clinics to learn more about their craft, and pretty extraordinary opportunity that's happening for those students who were honored after sending in an audition and achieving that, what normally would have been this honorable space to play in some amazing, situations. So in other words, they found an alternative to help, celebrate those students. And that is all I have for this evening.
Steve, do you have anything to share now, or just want to wait for?
I'll wait for the building update.
Okay, thanks. I just want to remind everyone that annual town meeting is May 15th at the high school. I also want to let everyone know that Project 351 ambassadors and alumni members, along with WHS Student Council, are running the Cradles to Crayons Spring Service Drive from May 3rd to May 14th in all of our schools. Cradles to Crayons is an amazing nonprofit organization that gives clothes to children in low-income or homeless situations. The Cradles to Crayons mission is to make sure every student in Massachusetts looks and feels their best. So Cradles to Crayons collects donations of new or gently used clothes from infant sizes to adult medium, and they also collect baby items, shoes, books, and toys. Their saying is quality equals dignity. So they always ask for donations of clothes in very good condition, like no rips or stains. They're pretty strict about that. And every donation is greatly appreciated and makes a big impact on our community. So there will be school-based communications about those collections. And those are my updates. And I'll turn it back over to Steve for building project updates.
Thank you, Kristen. The HVAC Hastings project is in design right now, and continues towards a bid later this summer. With that bid in hand, we anticipate, hopefully, that it fits the town's previous votes for that project, and if so, then we'll begin construction as soon as we can, which obviously is dependent upon kids not being in the school system and in Hastings at the time. The Hastings sprinkler work and the resultant bid that we had early in the year will come up at town meeting on May 15th. We hope that we are going to request that additional money be added to that project, which resulted as a result of what we would call a successful bid versus the two prior bids that were much more expensive than what was anticipated. Again, we hope that you will show at town meeting on the 15th and vote in favor of adding those additional funds so that very valuable project can move forward. Bids are out and requested to supply propane as a backup fuel for the Fales School. For those who don't know, the Fales currently is being supplied with natural gas by the gas company, but when we went solar and heat pump for heating, the gas company decided that they could no longer supply gas for the building as backup fuel. And as a result of that, we're required to supply a backup fuel for both the standby generator as well as for building heat should the heat pump or other parts of the facility fail. The bid for that is due on the 17th of May, and if that's a successful outcome, then the tanks and the resulting contract for supply of fuel would occur sometime in late May or early June for installation at Fales. Which now brings us to the bigger picture, and that's the Fales project itself. Fales continues to be within its budget, and we are using very, very tight control of the scope and the use of the project contingency funds, which are embedded in the project both as the construction manager's contingency as well as the owner's contingency. The school building committee has used value engineering to reduce the overall budget, which finally brought us within the range that the state's MSBA would fund. However, in doing so, we had to evaluate, using value engineering, the project scope over a period of time, which delayed the project at the start by at least a month. And that brings us eventually to my closing discussion on this subject. We're now working through the scope items that were removed in the beginning of the project in order to meet the MSBA's financial criteria. And there are many of items that, based on value engineering, were removed with the hope that at the end of the project, with successful negotiation with a number of contractors, that we would be able to add back in. At this point, we don't really know whether we'll be able to do that, since there have been a number of items that have required us to use contingency funds to meet the needs of the project and continue the scope as outlined in the beginning, resulting from value engineering. At previous meetings here, I've discussed what has been the schedule for the project, and as a result of items such as the original delay, the delay in the delivery of steel to the project, and other items that have come along as part of the use of contingency funds, we finally got a clear picture as to when we expect the Fales project to be completed and available for occupancy. Unfortunately, it means that we will start school in the old building, and if the schedule continues on the pace that it is, we would hope to get a final occupancy certificate sometime late in September of this year, with a probable ability to occupy the new building somewhere around October the 7th. And that in and of itself is an interesting thing, because The construction manager has held $180,000 of the project for overtime expenses in order to meet schedule. It's clear, based on where we are, that we're not going to meet the original construction document schedule. And as a result, the committee is discussing, whether or not it's an intelligent thing to do to spend overtime money to still be late. And so that is a subject matter that the school building committee is working with at this point with the contractor. So having said that, it's potential that the school would be occupied with a move occurring perhaps during either Columbus Day weekend or, for that matter, Indigenous Peoples' Day. There is a potential, they're studying 3 different options, of which the very latest would be perhaps waiting until Veterans Day as another 3-day weekend to do the move. And of course, the subject matter is both the impact on the school system in terms of education impact, but also on the budget. We certainly would like to save as much of that $180,000 in overtime value as we could and not impact the school system. So that's pretty much where we are. Otherwise, things are going fairly well, obviously with better weather. And as we move from the outside to the inside of the building, construction progress has been very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's a helpful update. Amber, you want to?
Just to add a couple pieces to Steve's thoughtful update. One would be that we will, once we get really tighter decisions on those timelines, we'll work with the parent community to make sure that we're providing very thoughtful updates. We'll also make sure that at some point you get a more in-depth opportunity for a full report where we also bring, you get them from Steve, but it's nice to get the architects in front of you as well at some point. And I think there's a lot of moving parts, as he just dictated right now to you. So we want to wait until we have good clarity and let them come to a presentation that gives you more detail. I just want to be reassuring to Phil's families and to the school community in general that Marianne and I are very confident that we will have a transition plan that allows that we can support faculty. And again, after the last year and a half that we've had, we're not looking to then have that faculty feel that they have another fragmented year or for students. So I just want to make sure that I state on record a high level of confidence that we can transition students smoothly and make sure that the continuity is there for a school experience year that will be of high quality. Having done such a move myself as a principal when I worked in Wellesley, it can be a very exciting and memorable and fun event as well, as families are getting to move into a beautiful space and an exciting event for the Fales community. So I want to be reassuring that that's how they will experience it, and I have a lot of confidence in that team that will be ready to go.
And I guess just to follow up on the confidence level of how and what we do, the project team meets once a week, and we usually have a 2+ hour discussion about what's going on and the details of it and all the pieces that are on the table to be reviewed by the entire team, including, discussion of how we move, what we move, when do we move, the things that are necessary to be in place to do it correctly, to provide the support needed to the teachers at the school and all the administration of it. Of course, as the town probably realizes, we've done this in different ways for 3 different moves, and I think we're pretty good at it, including the fact that, the teachers get the help they need to make sure that in packing and lugging stuff around and so on. And as Amber said, that process in planning is at least being discussed, and that there are outlines of that program in place already, with the idea that when the time comes, the decisions will be made and we'll do it as successfully this time as we have in the past. So, we have a pretty good team. No one should feel concerned, I guess, about how it's all going to work out, including me.
That sounds good. And I saw a lot of the windows have gone in, so you can really kind of see the shape of the building there, kind of the look and feel of it. It's pretty impressive. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Can we just ask a quick question, just to
sure.
make sure I
Yes.
understand when I answer other people's questions? So are you saying the steel was the steel delay, meaning the materials needed for the project was delayed?
Yeah,
Correct.
and the reason why that was is that there was some concern about an understanding of how the connections of the steel was going to be made, and there was a back and forth discussion between the architect and the steel supplier, which at the time was the beginning of the impact of COVID. The steel was delivered out of Quebec to us, and certain loads took a while to get here for that reason. So that was the beginning, if you will, of a certain slippage on the project. We also had delays in the winter based on how safe it was to work on the roof. For those of you who have noticed, it's a membrane roof, which when it got wet, in particular when it got some ice on it, became unsafe, and we had to shut down that project for a few weeks as well. So, there are little pieces here and there, and as we discussed in past meetings, we weren't sure how it all fit. Our construction manager was of the idea that, well, they could make up some of this time by spending the contingency. The problem is, at this point in time, we could spend it all and still not get there. And so then the question is, well, if we're not going to get there, then how much of an improvement would there be? Does it make a difference to the students whether we move in October or in December or late September if we have to start in the old building anyway? And that's being evaluated now in terms of the impact on the schedule itself and the impact on our finances. We feel as a school building committee that we owe the town the opportunity to save this money if it's possible.
Yeah, it seems financially responsible. Yeah.
Next on our agenda is citizens' requests, but is there anyone, I don't see anyone here to make a citizens' request. So we will move on to our COVID-19 impact update. So I'll turn it back over to you, Amber and Daniel, for some
Thank you. So tonight, the main focus of our time will be to look in a moment at the summer recovery planning that's in place. But I want to just call out a couple other details around where we are with opening. We continue to meet in a structured approach with the Superintendent's Advisory Council of all the building-based leadership PGA teams and other leaders of school-based groups so that they can bring questions forward and we can use that to update the overall parent and student population as well as faculty population. I do anticipate that as we stabilize with new routines, we might diminish the focus on that particular frequently asked questions document and things would shift back to typical school-based communications. Next, I would also note that as of now, a good celebration, of course, is that all pre-K to 12 students in Westborough are here full-time. The tents are up. We had a few glitches with the tents with the high winds that had happened, and then we'd had that snow. So a couple of the tents had to be closed Monday, Tuesday, but all tent groups are up and used again. The company came back and very effectively re-anchored things, made sure that they met all safety protocols, and they are actively being used. Weather remains in our favor, but of course with spring it makes it a little bit more complicated. You can see if you're driving through the areas that if you're near a school that we're definitely leveraging outdoor activity at a pretty high level. The high school, as Kyla thoughtfully mentioned, is in its first now closing of its third day of full in-person, and it takes time to adjust to feeling that there are more students in the building. I think our other schools have progressed through that as well. The bus feels more full, the hall feels more full as it is, and I think students are masked, they are on the move, it meets protocol guidelines for everything that we've read, but that doesn't mean that they automatically have an emotional sense of safety. And so we continue to make sure that we articulate having those protocols in place and working with students as they develop confidence in that. I also want to provide an update to close contact tracing, which we've put in place right away. I've been tracking last week and attended the meetings for the release of the improved guidelines from DESE, who had been working with the Department of Public Health to come up with a guideline for contact tracing that matched the 3-foot distancing of how we've leveraged our return to full in-person. So that organization, DESE, and with support of the Department of Public Health, indicates that 0 to 3 feet is our new guideline for contact tracing. That's within classrooms and that's within the bus. That would be for any contact tracing where there's more than a cumulative time spent of beyond 15 minutes within that space radius. Anything from 3 out to 6 feet, the original distance, we will notify families if their student might have fallen in that range, but they're simply asked to monitor their student for symptoms, and they are not needing to quarantine. That's very advantageous to limiting the number of students that need to be out and to miss school, but we will keep those families and those people contacted. And I think that, again, the COVID update notices flow with the routine of, a regular update from me out to the district as needed to keep people informed. We certainly have seen a modest decrease in the number of cases. I mean, you saw before vacation, I had been actually pushing a lot of notifications. And then the week before vacation, I think we had none. And I know I pushed out one today for 2 remote students. So there was no contact tracing needed in school. So there's positive signs of kind of stabilizing numbers. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, next week would be the week post vacation where you might see an increase in numbers. So we'll be watching for that. I certainly would advise families that if you feel your family traveled, you have the attestation form to, guide you, but also just if your student was particularly out and about and busy, you really want to monitor them through this weekend and into next week and make sure you're keeping them home if there are any symptoms. Those are the major updates. I wanted to say today DESE came out with an update for guidelines for graduation. They fell as we thought they would, and we do an outdoor graduation. It's properly distanced. We clearly meet the guidelines for protocol, and we will follow those and host as planned an outdoor graduation on the day as it is originally set for Kyla to be able to graduate, so no delay. I think the other piece of that is that the high school communication that did go out had some nice anchor dates for end of senior time and different events coming up. They are still working on decisions about what special event would characterize the block that would have been prom the time. I think both it's a big class and what they're interested in having falls across a wide range of, what's possible versus what would make sense and what we can do outside. So I think they're continuing to work collaboratively with the leadership of that group and then surveying students surveying students, to get information, and we'll come up with a decision soon around really anchoring some type of an event so that there can be a sense of celebration. I would say look to the high school updates for that, and I'll continue to update you here as well. In terms of that, other end-of-year events will be a part of the active kind of WLT planning on Friday as we begin to look towards. They'll be doing some discussion on Friday of summer school, which Daniel's going to take over here and spend some more time talking about. And we'll be talking about other end-of-year events and how to modify them so there's an appropriate sense of closure and celebration to the year. Those will most likely come to families as school-based updates, and then I'll pool them here to kind of give general information. So I think that's it for tonight in terms of necessary updates. Are there anything that you feel like you have questions on, or I'd like to turn it over to Daniel and give him an opportunity to talk about summer programming? It's good news. There's good news. Yeah. It feels good. Students that I've seen are telling me that they feel good and happy and satisfied that they have been able to get some better sense of normalcy. So there's a good general positive air. And I'll turn it over to Daniel so he can give you an update on our planning.
Okay, so we've been working as a leadership team to think through what's the best way to structure our summer program for our students. And, the typical summer, we operate a special needs program for students who are at risk of summer learning loss. By federal law, you need to offer a summer program for students who are on IEPs who might have summer learning loss. And so there's usually a very robust program for the special needs students, but not general education students. And at one point, we did have a general education summer program, but the participation rates were always so low that we ended up pulling out from doing that, because we would hire staff and invite like literally a couple of hundred students and have something like 20 to 30 students who actually would participate, and then their participation would be spotty too. So we also, as part of the special summer program, we would have an ELL piece to it for students whose first language isn't English and they're still learning English. And so what we're going to do this summer, though, is add back in. I'm going to show you a table here that reflects, sort of boils down a lot of planning that's gone on about when our summer program will take place and who is going to be invited. I'll walk you through that. But basically, the first row here is the typical program, which is a 5-week program that is either 3 or 4 hours, depending upon the student, in a day, so the 8 to 12 or 9 to 12. But it starts July 6th, and it goes through August 5th. Those are it's Monday through Thursday. And so that's the typical program. And what we're layering on here are 3 additional programs that are focused on general education, and adding the ELL students into the general education program, because having them be a part of the general ed program helps them with their English skills, obviously. And so we have a K-6 program that we're scheduling to run for 3 weeks. It will overlap with the special needs program but start a week later and end a week earlier, and it'll run 3 hours a day. And I'll just go and give you an overview, and then I'll talk through on each of the dates for each of the 3 different general ed programs, and then talk a little bit about who's being invited in. So 7 and 8. Again, general ed and special and ELL students, and it's also a 3-week program, so it mirrors the K-6. Again, 3 hours a day. And at the high school, we're going to be running 2 different programs, a 2-week program that's going to start a week after school lets out. There'll be a 1-week hiatus, and then there'll be a 2-week program, and then there'll also be a 4-week program. And that will be a 4-hour-a-day program. So, I mean, there are different needs at different grade levels. I mean, in the elementary level, we've hired a coordinator. We haven't had again, that program has not been in existence for the last several years. So we have a coordinator who's a general ed coordinator who is helping develop the curriculum. It's very much literacy and numeracy based. It's each week has a different theme to it. We're trying to make it attractive and not feel like a remedial program so much as a fun summer program that has some academic components to it. The target audience, though, for the program are students who have been struggling academically through the year, and that those students who really are behind are the ones that we want to give first opportunity to participate in, and depending upon available slots, we would then open it up to any other parents who want to send their students into the program. Again, it's sort of like our experience tells us it's kind of like you cast a wide net, you see who's going to be interested, and then you have to do this juggling match of matching, how many teachers do you need to the students that are going to actually participate. What's going to make it different, perhaps in terms of participation, I mean, and there's two things. One, we're going to offer busing, which typically we haven't in the past. So the busing is an enticement for families who, have tight schedules and can't really, get the kids to school and back in the middle of the day on a summer day. And so that might help. And what also might help is there might be some inclination to want to have their kids participate because they haven't participated so fully during the school year. Conversely, you could argue it the other way around, that even if you give busing, that the kids are going to feel so, sort of like they'll be so resistant to, the year has been stressful, and they're going to be resistant to actually coming and participating. So I just think it's kind of like, we don't really know what the numbers are going to look like. 7 and 8 are it starts, once we get into the secondary level, you're getting into the pipeline to get ready for high school, and you get into the course selection process, you're getting into levels. Numeracy and literacy are part of it, but there's also science and history classes, and if kids are failing classes, there's a higher stakes in terms of falling behind. In some ways, I mean, it's still high stakes even at the elementary level when you're falling behind, but it's just got a different feel to it in that, kids who are getting Fs, and not passing a course in the middle school years are going to be the ones that are invited in if they have at least one or more. And we will be offering those 4 subjects. Plus there'll be some social emotional learning that's part of the program too. So we'll be helping kids, just with adjustment issues. And at the high school, we're going to offer those 2 different options. The 2-week option is for kids who want to just bring up their grades. They're not necessarily failing, but they want it. They would like their GPA to give it a boost and be able to do better than they're currently have done during the school year. And then for the kids who are not actually getting credit for the course, so they've lost credit because they failed a course, those students would be coming in for the 4-week program. So again, busing would be available for those grade levels, and so we're now that we have the dates and the general structure planned, following tonight's discussion, if there is any, we are hoping to send out notices to parents by the end of the week, this week. Basically to start to get the ball rolling so that parents can think about their calendar and we can get commitments, and then we can start to do that sort of like back and forth of trying to figure out how many staff we need to hire and what the participation rates will look like. Is there anything I left out?
No, I think that's a nice overview. A couple key points to make for the 7th to 12th grade program, specifically the 2-week program, which gives them a chance for targeted recovery if they got a D in a subject, or they really struggled and missed a lot of content. And the same for the 7th and 8th grade. Someone failed the class, or they got a D. They were in a rescue phase for either classes they failed or ones where they did very poorly, and they want an opportunity to review and make better gains on that content. In both of those, I think it's very important for people to realize it's an invitation based upon that grade targeted need from the teachers identifying those students. And the recovery has a limitation. You're not going to come in and go from a D to an A. Like, you're going to get a 10-point recovery window. I know at Gibbons is like a general guideline. You come, if you're participating, if you failed, you will pass. And if you had a grade that was unsatisfactory, given your concerns about how much content you covered, you'd be able to make a 10-point recovery. So we're providing an appropriately scaffolded opportunity for improvement for students who put in the time and energy to come and commit to reviewing that content. And I think the parameters for obviously the 4-week recovery program at the high school look similar. It's for students who really need to pass the course. And the 2-week recovery program, I think it has some similar parameters in terms of, how much recovery you could gain, but I know that they were still finalizing that discussion. So I just want to make sure we set a clear expectation with families that we don't get 100 calls from people who got an A- who want an A+. So those are not the invitations that are going out. Yep. And I understand that those are important transitions as well. I mean, I think those are legitimate but that's not what this recovery target would be. And I respect anybody who would want to improve that grade. I love that about our students, and I value it. But this is really targeted against a year of complication. We'll learn from it, and we'll see what we like about it. It might well be one of those, extended practices that we found we value. So it's a nice exploration for us, and we'll see what kind of, as Daniel's so astutely pointed out, what people say they want and what they're willing to show up for and commit to and actually do, has been kind of a low number over the years, certainly at the elementary level. I think those, and the invitations or notations would go out probably end of this week, beginning of next week, at least from 7 to 12, starting to.
No, we're planning K through 12.
Okay, so that's good. They're further ahead than I thought. That's good. Yeah, so I think that feels like kind of where we wanted to leave you in terms of giving you some picture of that. I think providing transportation is a one-time special COVID-based opportunity. I want to be clear about that as well. Were we to extend other types of programming ongoing, we can't always guarantee that that would be a component of what we can do. But this year, given the ESSER 2 funding, we'll be able to leverage some coverage.
Questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The grade can only go up, right?
Right, yes. Yes, no, that's a great question. I love that. Yes, it can only go up.
Well, let's see. Could it just stay flat?
No, I think they feel confident that
It'll go up.
It'll go up.
Probably.
They'll be able to get it up. Sarah? any
Actually, my
questions?
question's kind of along that line too. For the high school, would that be reflected on the transcript then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then this is a more logistical question. I'm assuming that people have to commit to all weeks of the program. There's no I can do this week, but then I'm going away and I can come back the third week or what's the flexibility?
There may be more flexibility at K6, but for the credit recovery piece at the secondary level, there
Yeah,
would not be any
it's a
flexibility.
lock-in, definitely 7 to 12, yeah.
And another logistics piece, is there a fee for this, or is there no fee? No fee. Okay. Yep.
Great questions.
Yeah.
That'll help us.
And,
Go ahead, please.
No, go.
One more question. So it's by invitation only, but you said something about casting a wider net?
Yeah, K6, the invitation will go out, and then in a few weeks' time, once we hear back from the students and their parents, I should say the parents at that grade level, those grade levels. So once we hear back from the parents, if there's available spaces, then we would just open it up to a wider audience, and then it would be probably a lottery if there's over demand.
Because you're not looking at that grade level to make 10 points on a grade.
Right.
It's more exposure and more time practicing the skills that maybe
It's
they're
it's
behind.
skills-based
Yeah,
recovery.
okay, all right. Lisa, do you have any questions?
No, I was in a meeting with Irene and NRT recently, and they're going to make it work when it comes to transportation.
Okay.
And they've been very open to whatever our needs are, which I think has really been exciting.
Good to hear.
Yeah, we'll most likely use the big buses for this transportation this year,
Okay.
this summer.
Oh, and the other question I had was, will the middle school session be at the middle school, will the high school session be at the high school?
Yeah, but the K6 most likely would be at Mill Pond.
Okay. And also, just to be clear, it's the grade that you're finishing. Because some summer programs, you sign up for the grade. It's the grade you're finishing, and that's why you're there to finish up the work
Yes.
from that grade.
Correct.
Yes, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Is there a possibility that, based on this year, everything is different, that the sign-up rate could be really, really low? That we may have to think
Yes,
this through?
there's a
again?
possibility, or really, really high.
No idea, that's
Would
so
be a good
interesting. We
problem
have
to
no
have.
idea, we just have
But
no idea.
I don't know, what do you say? You all got kids?
I know, everybody, we can place our bets. Will they come in high or low? Really don't know. I mean, it's not, it's not a typical,
I think parents would say it's going to be really high, and kids would say it's going to be really low.
yeah, exactly.
Right, and then parents' ability to actually win that battle
Wouldn't that-
is probably going to be really low.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like this is the first, looking ahead to the summer, this is the chance for people to maybe go on a vacation because everyone in their family can be vaccinated or they'll feel safer to do that. So maybe
Yeah.
they'll do, right, it's so.
That's a
we don't
very
know.
good point.
We don't
I
know.
just want to emphasize that part of our planning for next year is looking at recovery support all year. So I want families to not be anxious. We're not looking to raise anxiety. The specific opportunity to do some grade improvement, 7 to 12, or to pass a class you failed, this is what you need to do. If you're concerned that your child might have issues where they have gaps, but you're not sure where and what, and you're feeling anxious, and maybe you should put them in, we're going to be doing recovery all year, and I think that I want people to feel confident that you need to do what your family needs.
Yep, right.
Yeah, I certainly would echo, the most important thing for the kids at this point and for the parents is the mental health of everybody.
Yeah.
The making up the academic piece at the expense of the mental health is not a good idea.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's important.
Thank you, yeah.
And, that's a reminder that the social emotional learning series has started on Tuesday nights. There's 5 more on Tuesday nights from 7 to 8 p.m. Sorry, I didn't put this in my reports. But there's still an opportunity where you can sign up and join these sessions, and they're really informative. The first one was last night, and it was, extraordinary to hear someone talking about the issues that will help you as a parent, help you as a person. I just thought it was a really good support network that's starting in that group of resources. So you can look that up. There was Amber had sent out an email. You can go back to it. There's a link to sign up.
Great.
I had one more question about summer recovery. So for remote families, so this is an in-person. In-person, but remote students will also be eligible, like you'll send invitations to them if they struggled and be invited
Yes,
into this, but
yeah.
it's an in-person
Yes.
program, so, okay, just so families understand what
Yep.
they're getting themselves into.
Just one wild thought. My wild guess is there'll be low number of signups from any grades below 9th. I think the parents, the desire to increase the grades, the GPA would be 9th and up, frankly.
Kyla's agreeing.
I think that Raghu is making a
We'll
prediction.
note your prediction. We call that an assumption and a prediction that we will see how it plays out.
Wild guess.
All right, well, thank you.
Welcome.
And more information coming soon. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is a calendar recognition of Indigenous Peoples' Day, Columbus Day. And we have discussed this before. This issue has been brought to us via some citizens' requests. Also some petitions, some students had some petitions about renaming Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples' Day. And we've also noticed that some of our surrounding communities have started to also recognize the day as Indigenous Peoples' Day. So Lisa brought it up again that as something really important to put on our agenda for us to have a discussion about. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Lisa to kind of lead us off in this.
So I've been thinking about this since last time we talked about it, and the more I'm thinking about it, the more I started to do a little bit of research to understand, and the reason I think it's important to me as a school committee member is that what we value in our school system, we usually align with our policies and the way we function. So when I think about Columbus Day, the name being put on the calendar, I think to myself, does that align with what we teach as character education in the Westborough Public Schools? And my belief is that it is not. And in order to align with that value of what we believe we've iterated in our meetings and in the past about how we feel about issues surrounding anti-racist practices. I think that this is one of those things where altering the name Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day makes sense to me. In my research, I discovered that it has been passed where they have dropped the Columbus Day name in Cambridge Public Schools, Wayland, Chelsea, Pittsfield, Lawrence, Somerville, Melrose, Holyoke, and many more. The law itself is a bill up at the House. It didn't pass the first time, but basically it replaces Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day in the Massachusetts general laws is where the bill was at. And that it would celebrate, the celebrations, Columbus Day celebrations erase the true histories of colonialism, genocide, and racism that Native peoples have experienced and continue to face. This is part of the bill description. It would change the second Monday in October to Indigenous Peoples Day and acknowledge that impact and celebrates Indigenous resilience and survival in Massachusetts as well as throughout the Americas. Cities and towns all over the US have taken this step already, and an increasing number of states are doing so. So this is for Massachusetts to do in itself. But more importantly, when I think about it, I want us to be able to align with what we believe. And Columbus Day, I believe that we educate our students in who Christopher Columbus was and is. I think that we accurately do that now. I don't think it was always done. But this is not a way to reduce or remove history. We continue to teach about Christopher Columbus. What it does instead is allow us to honor Indigenous people versus honor Christopher Columbus. So it's not about cancellation culture. It's not about removing history from our textbooks. It's about simply aligning with the values that we have in Westborough Public Schools. So that's why I thought it was really important that we readdress and think more about this.
Any comments, discussions, questions, Kyla?
I'd just like to agree with everything you said. I think it's not about erasing history, but more of supporting those who weren't on the good side of it. And Indigenous Peoples Day, I think, would be the first step in doing that as a Westborough Public School, especially with like our vision and mission to be like anti-racist and supportive to all our like minority communities. So I do agree with what you said, Miss Lisa.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, I think it opens a bigger picture discussion. One of the things that the United States is fraught with, in starting with Massachusetts and how we treated the quote-unquote indigenous people here after King Philip's War. We know about Lord Jeff in terms of his methodology of treating Indians and so on. The history of the United States is ripe with this particular issue across the board, almost for everybody who was different than the white Anglo-Saxon. And that was true with the English colonization across the world. One of the things that we're seeing now in the country is a relook at these issues, particularly the issues associated with race and how we as a country deal with it, which I think historically, I think we can all say is very poorly. And I think this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of a consideration of how we teach, our students, our kids, to understand themselves in the bigger picture of the world. And one of the things I've always said as a member of the school committee is one of the things that we have fostered is the ability of our students to go out and see what the rest of the world looks like by virtue of being able to travel. And I think every student that was able to go to the Galapagos and spend a few days in a Spanish-speaking country, particularly in South America, I think they can make comparisons of what we have versus what they have and how their society works. Like I said, it's very interesting that, the history of the United States is pretty much the history of English law and English understanding of themselves in the world. And I got to say, across the board, if you look at the colonial powers, the English did better than most, but as far as what they left behind, like I said, it's slightly better than the other colonizing countries like Spain and Portugal and so on. But we as a country, if we're going to survive in the way the world seems to work now, our education system has to step up to a true understanding of all peoples, what their needs are, and how they fit into our society as a whole. Without doing that, we're going to crash and burn, and I think it's pretty obvious over the last year that we have problems that we have to work out. So, you know, I think the recognition of this need is true, and certainly in teaching that part of Indigenous people for us in Massachusetts, there's plenty of things to do that could be done on that day. Particularly early English history in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is quite eye-opening. You know, and we see the impact of some of that in terms of school mascots. Okay, which now we're saying, well, you know, that's probably not the best thing to do. And many school systems have Indian names. You know, particularly regional schools have Indian names. There's one that's north of us that's not too far away. But anyway, that's my point on this, and I think there's a lot to do that this could open the door to be able to do. And I think it would be helpful for students to hear about some of these things so that they can think about what it means and how they live their lives going forward. You know, travel is one way to get there. Putting these issues in front of people to think about, not necessarily to direct, but to let them think about it. And I think it makes them a better student and a better citizen as a result. So you asked, that's my opinion.
Thank you. Sarah, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just had a couple of things. Like Lisa said, the Westborough Multicultural Club and members from We Care did come to our meeting last summer, and I know that we've talked about it a few times since then. I went back through the petition. There was about 80 compelling and thoughtful comments, and about 40 of them were from current and former students, and some employees and others were parents of students. So it was a great read. I don't know if you guys have a chance to go back through it. And then, as Lisa mentioned, you know, other states and cities nationwide have changed went ahead and changed the name. I know we can't do that here. But personally, going back through the history of like why the second Monday was named Columbus Day, it was just a good reminder of like how we all ended up here, despite having very different backgrounds, experiences, and ancestry. So like I said, it's a federal and state level decision, like Lisa said, to change the name, but I think we definitely have room in our calendar to, just out of respect for people and our students, I would support it as well.
By the way, I think it became Columbus Day for a political purpose.
Yeah, that's
Seems like
interesting.
it.
You know,
Yeah.
and so this broader issue that Lisa brings up really started from something totally different in the first place.
And I think too, like when you have a holiday named after people or after an event, that's what you want to honor and recognize. And so I think, you know, while we teach about exploration, and Columbus is just one of the world explorers that came to the Americas, I don't necessarily want that day to honor him, but perhaps recognize and honor those whose lives were taken away and cultures taken away due to exploration. So it's about teaching a balanced perspective on that time in history and thinking about why at that time it was acceptable to do those things. And you know, I think about when they, at the high school, and they teach about the Holocaust and Hitler's rise to power, it's like, why did that happen at that time? And what do we think about it now? And how that changes and evolves. And it's such an important discussion to have with children of all ages. So, yeah. Raghu, do you have anything you want to add to the discussion?
Yeah, my thoughts are, one of the traits that makes us a great nation is because we are willing to recognize our mistakes and try to correct them. So just because we've been teaching all the greatness about Columbus all these years doesn't mean we should continue to do that. We know for a fact that Indigenous people were hurt during the process, and we are willing to change it. Name recognition is just a symbol. It's a symbolic reference, but deeper than that, we need to change how we teach to our kids, not just the greatness of Columbus, but also what happened to the Indigenous people along the way.
And I know those changes have been taking place in our curriculum for a while, but this could just be like an outward sign that, we're reaffirming our commitment to anti-racism and changing the name.
And like Steve rightly pointed out, we shouldn't be doing this for political purposes. We should be doing it for the right reason.
I think it's a step towards reconciliation,
Yes.
which I think is really where we need to be and go and be brave and admit to our mistakes and learn, grow.
I just want to interject that the greatness of Columbus has not been part of our curriculum for a while. I mean, we teach about the explorers and trade-offs, and that history is complicated, and there's 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides, depending on who's involved to the story. So that's years past, in terms of the curriculum.
I mean, if you were going to honor the fact that that North America was found by Columbus, you really have to call it Leif Erikson Day, right? Who was here 1,000 years before that?
There's actually there's at least one state, if not more, that have, instead of Columbus Day, it's Leif Erikson Day,
There you go.
because they recognize him as the original explorer who came here. So it's just an interesting, it's an interesting thing, the name of this holiday. Do you want to?
I'd like to make a motion to change our calendar name on that nationally recognized holiday day from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day in Westborough Public Schools on our calendar.
Second.
And Steve, you second?
Yes, I did.
Any other discussion about it? All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Dulé, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes?
Right, yes.
Vincent, yes. All right, 5-0, and thank you everyone for your thoughtful discussion and your research into making this important decision. Yeah.
Excellent.
And I
thank
do
you.
understand that we obviously don't have the authority to change the state name of what it's called. And I understand that sometimes for employment purposes, it needs to be referred to as Columbus Day in terms of having the day off or a paid holiday and all those types of things. But within our school community, as we've started to in the past couple of years, refer to it as Indigenous Peoples' Day, it can actually say that on our calendar now too.
And people can reach out to the representatives and senators to, take action. And it is school committees around the state that are starting this, and towns. And there, you can contact your legislators to do the same at the state level.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think, as we've talked about around the evolution of the discussion, I think we certainly have articulated as well that we'd like to see leadership from the town side to parallel, and I think to reach our perspectives to the broader community and the work that we do. But I think you voiced the values of our district and certainly of your role as leaders in the community and of the school curriculum and the work that we do. So certainly faculty applauds as well that opportunity and recognizes it. So I want to thank you for the conversation, and I think we'll see how it evolves. So I think we'll look towards, and I do think it's important to Daniel's point that we are clear that because it says it on the calendar doesn't mean that we're in any way at this point doing in-depth celebration of Christopher Columbus. I mean, the days when we did that have evolved well beyond, the days when I was in school. And I think it doesn't mean that we don't speak about the impact of exploration, both positive and negative for all of the outcomes. And I just think we will continue to look at it. So along with a range of curriculum that came out of the review, and we look forward to that work.
Yeah. And just to be clear, we still will teach about Christopher Columbus. So it isn't, we're going to not ever mention his name again or teach about him either. It's providing that balanced point of view. And like you said, the positives and negatives that come from those events in history.
Correct. I mean, the state, if those who are interested in looking at the state standards on history, in social studies, they're very articulate on the point that, history is, to some degree, in the eyes of the beholder, and you have to teach it that way. That there's multiple perspectives on all events, and that's a important theme for all of us to understand, to be global citizens. And so I think that's an essential piece of the state standards and of how we teach the curriculum.
No, I would agree, and I respect the fact that at the state level, it's inclusive of those complexities. And to Lisa's point, our perspective isn't to eliminate or to cancel, but to gain the broader perspectives, to look closely at the language we use, and to really respect the intellect of our students in their capacity across starting at very young ages to really reflect and think deeply on their own, to look at different experiences in history and to see the mosaic of how people live it. So I think the evolution of our curriculum is in alignment with not eliminating lenses of history, but actually overlapping them effectively. And we continue to look at doing a good amount of professional development around that. And again, we have growth to make in that classroom by classroom and teacher by teacher. So, I'm sure that there's someone sitting, well, wait a minute, my kid had this experience. Of course, we have never represented that the articulation of our curriculum is going to be exemplarily explored by every teacher exactly the way it should be. It takes good PD and on-the-ground training and supervision and support to, over time, develop a rich, well-based curriculum that has, really the strengths we want it to have. And historically, teachers can get into their routine where they're using a curriculum they're comfortable with and they'll roll it out. And we work very hard with them to shed old materials, to set aside other perspectives of curriculum that is dated. And I think we've made huge progress in that at the elementary level in the last 2 years. As you look at the social studies innovation curriculum coordinator that we put in place, that's not even a fully budgeted position for us in terms of long-term stay. It will come before you for these very reasons as part of your equity-based work that happens from strong professional development and good curriculum work. So Kristen Robertson has done an incredibly good job for us to really breathe life into that curriculum and look at it with an equity-based lens. So again, as a celebration of your decision, I think it echoes the direction of the work of the district.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn this back over to Daniel for an ELL program review summary.
Okay. I'm sure you're all wondering, what is a ELL program review? And why am I summarizing it? So let's see, where's my document here? Did I not open it up? I didn't. Let me go back to here.
Catch up from the agenda, yeah.
So this is a review that's done by the Department of Education periodically. For a district like ours, it would happen every 6 years. It's what they call it their tiered focused monitoring system, and you got a review a summary recently. Sherry Stevens gave some passing comments about the review that the special education program went through. This is one that the ELL program is going through. And essentially, what the department's doing is they're making sure that we're complying with state and federal regulations when it comes to, some of our neediest students who are coming here to, and not speaking English as their first language. And what they do is there are 4 tiers of districts in the state, and a tier 1 district like ours is one that is considered to be highly compliant and effectual in terms of their practices to begin with. And so this set of documentation and the degree of scrutiny is, sort of somewhat reduced compared to a Tier 4 district, but it's still a very involved process. And so starting over a year ago, they told us that on these 13 different indicators, they would be asking us to submit documents that we would upload to them. So each of those will be is a file cabinet or a folder, if you will, with multiple sets of documents pertaining to, testing being the first one, proficiency assessment, and then there's accountability measures and meeting those. How do we identify our L's being the number 3? What kind of programs and services do we have? Number 5. How do we determine when somebody's ready to exit and that they're ready to exit? How do we involve the parents, et cetera? So those are, they're all worthy things for us to focus on and make sure that we're doing well. The state is got their heart in the right place. It is incredibly time-consuming and burdensome to produce what they want us to produce. I give my hats off to Maeve and the ELL team. They spent hours and hours and hours, and Maeve uploaded documents and spoke with the Department of Education staff multiple times and, re-uploaded documents. And at the end of the day, we did as we thought we would do, is that we were not found lacking on any of the 13. Well, I should say on one of the 13 indicators. So there's some work for us to do, but it's highly unusual to come into a district, even a district like ours, and say, you have only one partially implemented out of the 13. So they basically said, you're doing everything right, but on this one, and I'll give you the context on it. This has to do with our teachers meeting a new standard set a few years back called the SEI endorsement. What is it? Secondary, what is SEI?
English instruction.
The secondary English instruction endorsement. So everybody has to take a course or pass a test, even if you're a general ed teacher, of how to effectively instruct teachers. And they pulled a list of all of our teachers, and they found we had something like 12 teachers that hadn't taken the course. And so the way it goes is even if you have never had an ELL teacher, if you haven't had an ELL teacher, you don't need to have the endorsement, but if you have one
If you haven't had a student.
in 1 year, then you have a year to make up to get the endorsement. Well, it turns out of the 12 or 13 teachers, I think 10 of them had the endorsement, but didn't realize that when they passed the test or they took the course and they submitted their paperwork to the department, that the department wouldn't say you're endorsed until the teacher actually filled out a form that said, I'm applying for the endorsement. So the fact that we're partially implemented is kind of I kind of feel like it's a bureaucratic snafu of sorts. So there may be 2 teachers in our district that had one, that are not SEI endorsed. It doesn't mean we don't take it seriously and we can't be more tickety-too and sort of trying to chase it down, but it is, you would think if you submitted the proof that you had taken the SEI course or passed the test, that then the department would be smart enough to just say, okay, this person met the criteria.
And I think to make sure that we're clear on record with you guys, I think the ELL department and the implementation of all the work they do with ELLs came out as fully implemented. This is a district HR piece, an internal kind of record keeping that we own, and I think Maeve and her department for their work, I want to be clear that, we all own it, but at the same time, I think they fulfilled an incredible amount of really good work.
We've got a ton of kudos, as you would imagine, from the state saying, and Maeve has been asked to speak, for us in front of other leaders in the state on several occasions for our parent education program, our going out to buildings in the community and putting on literacy nights, our co-teaching that we have, the inclusion of our students, the speed with which our students get through the program, and then in addition to that,
Our teachers as opposed to tutor commitment financially.
Yeah, I was going to say, though, the impact, there's a measure out there about the effectiveness of teachers who are teaching Ls versus teaching special needs students versus teaching low-income students, and then other students who aren't in those categories. And it's a wonderful measure to have, because you're asking the question: are some of your neediest students, are they being taught by teachers that are less experienced or less impactful than your other teachers? It's a great equity measure to have. And our students who are Ls, as well as our special ed and our low-income students, are growing at the same rate, and so getting access to the same quality of teacher as our other students who are not from the more vulnerable. And that's not the case in every district. And so, so in any case, long story short, is we did very well on it. And if you want to know anything more about it, Maeve is the go-to person. I'll try to answer questions if you have any now, but that's where we stand. Is we did very well after a lot of.
And we'll return Maeve to doing her annual report, but in honor of the fact that she already completed this, so we weren't doing an additional report this year on those updates, but in next year's rotation, we'll return to the regular rotation of program updates where you get kind of the statistical analysis and, information from her on the development of our program.
She comes pretty early in the calendar, doesn't she? Was that true, that she's
She
a
comes
fall?
yearly, yeah, she comes to school committee?
The school committee.
Yes,
actually.
so do a series, usually every major core curriculum area comes
Typically,
before you.
This year, our schedule is off.
Right. No, well, we see her in the fall, is what I was wondering. I do look forward to her report. I don't know, Raghu, if you've ever seen a Maeve Hitzenbuehler report. It really just, I'm sorry, I just get excited about it because what it does is it lets everyone know how extraordinarily the tapestry of our district is so rich. And what her report does is it just reveals it. It says, here's who's here, who speaks English as a second language, and it's pretty extraordinary and detailed. And I don't know, it makes me really proud when I hear that report.
Yeah, no, it's a good one, yeah. Well, she looks forward to bringing it forward to you next year for your enjoyment.
Well, kudos to her. Please
Yeah,
pass
thank you.
along our
Yes.
thanks and gratitude. I'm always grateful to have her at the helm of this very important work. So she's a keeper. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So are there any questions or anything? All right. Thank you, Daniel.
Yep.
So we'll move on to our grants update and review of COVID funds.
Yeah, so tonight I'll give you an overview of mostly just our COVID grants. As I indicated earlier in my update report, they are complicated and a lot of tracking that is involved with it. And I have to say that the guidelines that we've been given are not forthcoming. And when they come, we're rapidly spending our funds, and then when the guidelines come, it's like, oh, we have more time to spend it, but or you're restricted to spend it a certain way, and then when we start spending it that certain way within the guidelines, they say, oh, well, you can expand upon the ways that you spend it. So we're always moving with this, but we are being strategic about how we are spending the funding, and we are spending it. And these funds overall must be spent beyond what we would normally spend in our budget. So it would have to be COVID-related. And then there are guidelines within each of the grants. But overall, just a summary that it must be COVID-related. So if you look on this summary sheet here, you've seen this before, but I've added and updated some of the ESSER grants, which are the most recent grants that have come forward once Biden was in office here. The Fund 102, the $849,150 That's a school reopening grant, and we've been actively spending against that, and that's a grant that we spent fully. I've had to put forward an amendment based upon how we are spending, and that was approved with no issues, and we're good with that. The Fund 113 is our first ESSER grant that Daniel had applied for $80,519, and that too is fully spent. ESSER 2, which is Fund 115, which is $292,495. That's COVID impact relief funds. So we anticipate that those funds will be fully expended as well. Now, ESSER 3 is the most recent allocation that came forward, and in fact, just recently we found out what the Westborough allocation is, and that's $634,443, which that's a considerable amount of money, and we're very grateful for that. It's under the American Rescue Plan. We don't have specific guidance on that, so we're waiting from the state to receive that guidance. Now, the caveat with this is that we don't have to spend it before June 30th. So ESSER 2, ESSER 3, we can carry it forward into next fiscal year. So we are trying to spend what's necessary for the end of this fiscal year first, and then what's necessary for next year will carry forward. So carrying on is the Fund 117, 118. That was an early grant. That was a technology grant. Right from the very beginning, that was spent. And then we had a recent grant as well, which was the COVID prevention grant. That was $130,325. So we have plans for almost all of this. We're still working, as we said, on the summer school programming and what we could allocate towards this grant for summer school programming. So some of this is still to be determined.
That's the credit recovery and the programming that we heard about earlier.
Right.
Can be a COVID expense, right?
Yes, exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, and they've released some of the restrictions on these ESSER grants and the most recent grants on what we could pay for this. And there's a couple of grants within ESSER that we must allocate at least $10,000 towards mental health support, which we have already identified ways to support that for this year and for next year. So the ones that are not highlighted are our typical entitlement grants, and I'm just showing you those as those are year over year. We always get these grants. I'm not going to review them with you, and there's no tabs for them, but I'm just showcasing them as other grants that we manage. And then below that is the FEMA and the CARES Act. And just to remind you, these are two reimbursement grants that the town maintains transactions for. We, in collaboration with the town, expend for this, and so we share expenses, and then the town puts in reporting, which is quite detailed, asking for reimbursement. And the FEMA is quite restrictive, and there's not much that we're getting back for reimbursement on that, but the CARES Act is more open for what we can put against that. Now, within, this might be a good time, Daniel, to go over the CARES Act that the town reported recently today to us, and it's up on the screen. So the town on the CARES Act between FEMA and CARES is a $1.69 million reimbursement grant. And you can look this over in great detail at your leisure, but we have been collaborating and meeting, Amber and I, and then me and the town finance director individually on a regular basis, and at the town manager, coordinating and collaborating like with the fire department as to how much they need for their purposes versus what we need versus other towns, departments. And so Originally, FEMA, if there were any qualification expenses, would only reimburse us 75%. And like I said, they then recently changed the guidance and said, now we can get 100%. But it's very difficult to get anything reimbursed off of that. Those are basically like major infrastructure needs when this first came about, cleaning hospitals, things like that, which schools really didn't have any expenses against. So Daniel, if you could go down just a little bit more. So they put down some outstanding issues. So these are the things that we're managing with the town, and they've identified. So for the school purposes, we have tents, so that's not the total tent expense for outdoor classrooms. The outdoor tent expense is $61,000, but this grant could only support $13,709, knowing that we could put the rest on our own ESSER grant. And then we have a school salaries against there, so the remaining amount with our lump sum pay, that's where they get 5 paychecks at the end of the year to carry them through the summer, of a total of $273,200. And we did anticipate that we would do school pool COVID testing, but decided that we would not, so they took that off of there, and then we put it against the salaries and the tents. So the full amount looks like it's been expended, or we anticipate will be expended between the town departments and ourselves. So there's unemployment, high unemployment costs that the town incurs because of people taking off leaves and so forth. Okay, so if we go back to are there any questions on this?
Yeah, my question is, can we, for example, if it's the grant against the ESSER grant, for example, it's against mental emotional support, can we set up something permanent with these grants, not just spend it temporarily?
So the grants will eventually end either the end of next year or the following year. There is a grant that will end in '24. I guess this would be something for Amber and Daniel. I think that there's an emotional, mental health support already starting to build in the curriculum already, correct? Or am I, yeah. So
the reason why I'm asking, the reason why I'm asking is it's a concerning thing that you'd start something because we have grant now, then we run out of money 2 years later, and then we'll either have to pull back or stop completely.
Right. I think to that point, you're looking at covering costs that aren't program-based in many cases. The costs that we had were applied specifically against COVID, such as staff we had to hire to run the remote for those offsets and for the teachers on leaves. Teachers returning from leaves, remote leaving, brings those teachers back into the fold for typical salary allotment. And the positions that were hired just for that experience do indeed go away. Additional interventions that were provided, such as the summer school work, that's an add. It's a recovery-based intervention. If everyone loved that and we utilized funds this year, it would need to become some type of a budget conversation, because that's right, that funding wouldn't exist. Almost all of the allocations for the things we've expended are one-time expenditures for that reason. We have layered in some staffing. I mean, I anticipate that against, for example, the ESSER 3, which we're letting roll forward, that $600,000, we will utilize that for additional tutor support, classroom intervention, potentially an additional special education educator next year to help with recovery-based work. They wouldn't be maintained long-term in budget, unless I brought them forward to you as a proposal, and then they would need to fold into our allocation.
Thank you.
Yep.
So you had mentioned that only 10,000 is mandatory to be used for mental health in the, I thought you said the
In the ESSER 2.
ESSER 2. That doesn't mean we're just going to use 10,000 on mental health. I want to just
clarify?
No, so existing right now, we've identified $16,000. We've fulfilled the state requirement. Every district that got ESSER 2, it was required that 10,000 of that would go towards that. So a minimum of that amount.
So I guess I'm really asking, in recognition that in recovery, that we're going to need social emotional learning support and just support in general for mental health, are we thinking that some of those dollars will be used in that direction besides the 16,000?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, if you look at like the design of the summer programming, a strong social emotional learning undertone to all based programming, not beyond just the academic, is just a perspective of approach. Not all of it costs money. It's a matter of the planning and the staffing and the curriculum development, and that's part of a philosophical approach that we'll plan. We have layered in a lot of additional work this year. It's been more that it's the staff we have, because I don't think that people would say that those needs necessarily go away. I mean, I think we've given you numerous reports on the work we've been doing here. So I think that we continue that support. If there's a financial overlay where it's required, we would definitely utilize COVID funds to do that. I mean, I think that's why we're holding those funds to see, you know, what emerges into we'd have no idea yet what's going to happen with the requirement for remote. If we have to provide some aspect of support to either buy into an Assabet Valley program or the state provides something for, you know, a very small number of students who couldn't return, we would then be suddenly called to expend those funds in that direction. So holding the ESSER 3 is essential. So, you know, we're trying to be very strategic. Right now, all of the funds that she's walking you through are expenditures we've made to survive this year currently, you know, and then through the summer, and then potentially, you know, some expenditures then heading into the fall. So, you know, I think we'll continue to look at whatever needs we have and bring forward to you ideas for how we'll respond.
So also, is the 273,200 on the CARES that says school salaries, is that for the summer, or is that for the extra COVID?
That's the staff that have been with, that's the end of the contract year for staff that have been teaching with us all year. That's for the 16 or more, you know, paras, teachers, and educators who have carried us through the remote/in-person work.
So those additional teachers that we need because of COVID.
Exactly, so that, hence, it was not in the budget. It was expended for COVID-related reasons.
And the guidelines are explicit that you couldn't use them to pay for regular staff. So they're only for staff added specifically for the crisis.
So if I were also listening to this, I would wonder what were some of the other expenses? I know what the reopening was. That was a CARES Act that was the early CARES Act for school reopening. And then there's the ESSER 80,000. So it says training and case screening. I'm just curious what that is.
So if we go back to that file, Daniel,
To what?
to the, where we.
spreadsheet?
Yeah. So down the bottom is your detail. Each fund that's on the summary sheet is identified on the tab. So Fund 113 is the ESSER 1, which is the 80,000. And so this is the application which gives you the detail of what it would be expended for. You just have to see how you see the instructional professional days and per hour. And then if you go over to the right a little bit more, it might give you more detail.
This was the summer programming funds that we used to get open. It was all of the teachers who worked all summer in those strategic planning groups. It was the PD to make them prepared. It was the planning groups, as well as some materials. And then mostly that was on-the-ground planning that Daniel orchestrated for, the 40-plus faculty who worked with us through the summer.
And developing the remote program as
Right.
well, so.
Yeah. And the case screening, which is usually done during the school year, was done over the summer. So we had to pay nurses and teachers and other staff to come in and do that So that's part of why the K-screening piece is there.
So that was actually expended really early and was the first intervention funding that helped us move through preparing to open.
And
go
so the
ahead.
detail, if you go through, if you want to look at the detail, each tab is associated with each grant. And if I know about something, we usually update that tab to, a lot of it has our notes in there. It might,
Great.
if you have any questions as to what some of the notes mean, feel free to ask me.
I just missed my tabs. I now
No,
see
no,
all
it's
the
fine.
tabs. I was like, I think people would be interested, like, I'm interested in what did we actually spend it on?
Yeah, so
People
no, I mean,
sometimes
I
ask me
think
that.
that's a great question. That's why we wanted to update you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the technology, the $8,000 of technology expended was all the hotspots.
yeah.
It was additional computers. It was, we layered them mostly all hotspots and technology-based Wi-Fi to get all of our families and faculty connected. That was expended very early and very quickly by John. If you look at the 13325, we talked about that fund a lot because it came late. The 130,325 right there, the COVID prevention grant, line 8, that was money that they released. It was like in February, and all of a sudden they were talking about this additional set of funds, and it was this 130,000. We utilized that to pay for, again, you realize we had to have staffing cover the full day Fridays because we had the gap in our half-day Fridays for special education students. And we leveraged a differential to staff to come in and teach while everyone else was remote. So that 130 was leveraged against that, as well as it paid for some additional tutors, one at Mill Pond, and an additional 2 teachers, I think, at Gibbons. So, I mean, we've lived these funds all year. I know exactly where they went. So I'm happy to definitely walk you through
Now,
them.
people ask me all the time, what are we spending all this, these
I
grants
would
on?
love, we can detail every penny. That's the glory of municipal
Yeah.
funding, you know. You can look at literally every expenditure of the 130,000, but I know where this is the work that we do, where Irene and I sit, I'm like, pay this against that, here's what I need to run these programs, Daniel needs this, Brian needs that, and we've just leveraged those funds to do this work to keep us moving forward. You say you need tents, we didn't say when or what, we said order them, and then we pushed them against these funds. I wasn't sure how we were gonna pay for the tents until we got the additional ESSER funds. You know, so those are the types of things that we've been kind of moving through all year. I think if you click through those tabs, you'll get the additional detail that
It's
will
good.
satisfy you.
I'm very good. I think I was just missing the tabs.
No,
I was
no,
like
it's
thinking,
okay.
What is this all? And do other people ask you what the money is being spent on?
Yeah, no, that's why this
We
is an
have-
important update.
Aren't you getting money from all these
Yeah.
grants? And the answer is yes, and it's being spent appropriately, and I can
I
see all
think
the
the
details.
rationale simply is the school committee has not gone back to the town to ask for money to do all the things that people saw us do.
Right.
And that's what we just went through is the reason why, because the federal government came up with the
I
federal
have
and
to
state government
say,
came
the
up with the
funding
money.
support has been very good. I mean, I'm kind of surprised, to be honest. I anticipated that we would be struggling a lot more and that these conversations would look different. Irene and Leah have done an incredible job to leverage strategic planning for the funds very collaboratively, such that, you know, the ESSER 3 funds right now, I know that there's a short list of staffing that we're going to push against those. Daniel and I are meeting tomorrow on class assignments and schedules, and any additional staffing we need, we will be planning against that number if necessary. And then we're going to hold a chunk of it to see what happens with remote. So I think the other allocation that Irene mentioned with the 115 there, the 292, 495, that's the one that we're leveraging against summer programming and some tent coverage, the differential of the tents ran about 70,000. We put almost 14 of it on CARES, and the rest is rolling over to ESSER 2 for the tents, and then staffing for summer. And then the differential will go against, you know, everything we need to, I mean, we have a short list. And if you actually look on the tab, I think you'll find sometimes a list of things we think might go against it, so.
Oh, sorry. I have a question actually about the food service. I know it's not really in these grants, but I read that that they were covering, the FDA, I think, was covering food next year as well. And so would we be able to offer more choices next year under that plan? Like, how does that work?
Are you referring to, rather than just cold bag meals?
Yeah, like I know like this year we kind of made it through and we did all the remote meals, and I know that affected things too. But would, even with the federal government saying they would cover lunches, would we be able to offer more variety next year as we had in the past?
Well, right now, we're seeing how bringing the students back in again and seeing how the rhythm of the food service is managed. We certainly have talked about food differentiation in the menu, and hoped that we would be able to offer that even before this school year ended. So I'm anticipating yes. I still have to have that final discussion with the manager.
Okay, that's good. And then were we going to do meals in the summer for those that need it, like we did last year?
There
Does that
hasn't been
cover
a
that?
definitive answer regarding that. It is a difference of the staff is usually contracted to the end of the school year and not through the summer. So that's something we need to discuss, and it's part of our summer planning.
Right, and that would be an actual cost for us, right? Because that staff, we pay that staff.
Cost for the food service
Yeah, the food
salaries,
service.
yes.
Yeah, that would
we
be-
pay the staff. I know the food is through Chartwell's or whatever. Okay.
Because a year ago, we had staff who had been not able to work their regular hours, so, because we had been closed. So we had funding available. So when we also started paying to bring them in, it was work opportunities and structure. And they also cared about responding at a high level to provide food to our families. I think you've also then seen the leverage of the food pantry stabilizing itself, working with Youth and Family Services and the schools to be able to do a stronger food response for families in need. So I anticipate we will step up if needed to participate in making sure that our families are well fed. But I'm hopeful that the structure of the food pantry will provide that. Because I think, I mean, last year, we kind of patchworked it together, and I also think then those people are going to be rotating out, hopefully to take a break.
Right, you're right. I forgot last spring looked totally different, where you could flip-flop the hours for the employees, and
Yeah,
and the food pantry was shut down. I forgot that too.
If
so.
we had to step up and pay them to that, we would definitely facilitate making that. We bring it forward as a budget expense and, put it in front of you to see.
Yeah, I would love to see those families roll onto the food pantry because they would get so much more for their whole family
Right,
from the
like
food pantry
groceries
than
and-
they
yeah.
would just getting like a lunch or something provided. So yeah, we work to do that too. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this detailed update. We appreciate all the work that's gone into that. And I know, again, it's a extra complication that came with everything else this year. And I know it's a lot to keep track of, and guidelines change all the time. And I know you've been working very closely with Leah and the town side of things too, and we just appreciate that strong relationship. So thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I would say go ahead and take a look at the tabs, and if you have other additional questions for Irene, just email her, CC me as well, please, so I know the range of conversation. There's a tab in there that provides kind of the tracking of the remote academy of Teamworks, and that's worth spending some time on. It's not, one we're going to do here now. It just takes too much long, but the details there for you. And if you have any other follow-up questions, just email us, definitely.
Okay, thank you. The last thing on our agenda is just the Assabet Valley Collaborative third quarterly update that you need to provide for us.
So we have to do I think we have to do 4 reports, obviously quarterly. And this is the third, and then you'll get a final at the end of the year. I think I try to pick, and we work as a board to find updates that are interesting and meaningful to you. And then others are just the financial benchmarks that need to come. This third quarter report is interesting because it speaks to the demise of EDCO, what had been really a very well-established collaborative, actually the collaborative I belonged to when I worked in both Wellesley and in Weston, and it financially collapsed. I believe it was facing aspects of mismanagement. It had surpluses that had been, exceeded what was allowable and then had other aspects of their financials which became problematic. When you look at AVC, the purpose of this memo is to share with you the financial stability of the Assabet Valley Collaborative, which is actually well leveraged, has no risk as of now of needing any type of dissolution, has passed with flying marks on all of its financial assessments, and any of the audits have come out really clean, which is, again, amazing, given that they also had a finance director transition. So, given that we've all been watching as a board the finances very closely because we had 2 financial director transitions and felt that we just weren't, wanting to take our eye off really looking at the detail. This memo just gives you some of the highlights there. I think it speaks, again, to their strong financial positioning. That said, they've been facing some pretty serious crisis in terms of revenue losses. And I think, this is a worthy update just to share with you, to be reassuring that Assabet Valley Collaborative, which we invest our funding in terms of services rendered for us in terms of professional development, membership in the collaborative, and then students who attend some of their specialized programming, I think remains in a very good place. So that's my third quarter report. Should you look at that and have any questions, I'm always happy to take them.
Yeah, I was wondering whether, particularly based on the benefits that we see with this, whether any of the EDCO communities might be solicited to join AVC.
It'll be interesting to see where we're further out for them. I think there's, what's the collaborative that Hopkinton's a member of in Natick? There's ones that are closer in that they might, because Accept Collaborative, I think, will pick up some of them. We actually,
I mean, there's some that are north of us.
yes.
That might be close enough to join.
Yeah, and I think that they might well do so. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, certainly people there are beginning to look at what would be viable for them. We already have students and districts who do access with kind of a robust set of out-of-collaborative membership of students that do come to programming at Assabet Valley because it's strong. And they can access Marlborough, where some of the core programming is. So I think those districts that are not really in-member districts but have students with us might well look to join now that they would be exiting EDCO. So I'll keep you updated on that.
Particularly any that are in District 4, which goes all the way to the New Hampshire border. And most of the meetings they do are in Marlborough.
Yeah.
So there may be, a natural affinity for Assabet Valley.
Yeah, no, worth looking at. I mean, again, I think, and Kathy Cummings is an excellent director, so I think, good things ahead.
I have the map of this. They're Boxborough, Acton, Carlisle, Concord, Bedford, Lincoln, Lexington, Arlington, Belmont, Waltham, Watertown, Weston, Newton, Brookline, Sudbury. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty substantial core of districts to collapse out of. I mean, again, I was in that one for years.
Yeah, any of those towns that abut 495 might be interested.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so that's my third quarter report. It was an interesting
you.
one. There you go.
So that brings us to the end of our agenda. We just have 3 more scheduled school committee meetings for the school year. The next meeting of the school committee will be on Wednesday, May 12th at 6 p.m. And our other 2 remaining meetings will be on May 26th and June 9th. I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote.
Julia, yes?
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes?
Durrett, yes.
Vincent, yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you so much.